Hello, my girlie. Welcome to Talks with SAE, the only late night, thought provoking, giggle inducing podcast for my ladies whose days melt into their nights. My girlie, you know that spiral trap you always fall for, where just like clockwork, you start measuring your life against someone else's and you start keeping up with the Joneses. And as expected, you end up feeling like pure shit afterwards. And tonight, that's what we're going to talk about, the comparison trap. From why you're always comparing yourself to others to the emotional and mental toll that it's actually taking on you, and how you can finally shift your mindset to escape this cycle and ensure that from now on, your life is just that, it's yours. So let's start by breaking down what the comparison trap is. To its core, the comparison trap is the habit of evaluating your worth or your success against someone else's. Unlike healthy comparison, this trap leaves you feeling inadequate. It leaves you feeling stuck. It leaves you feeling behind. It leaves you feeling like shit. It's like the mental voice that says, "Why am I not where they are?" And this isn't new, by the way. This is something that is deeply rooted in human nature. But today's societal landscape has made it worse, especially with the constant access that we have to everyone else's lives through social media, right? So there are psychologists that say the comparison trap comes from an evolutionary need as humans to assess our place within social groups. So back when survival for us as humans meant being part of a community, knowing where you stood within that community was vital. It was literally how you were going to survive, right? But fast forward to today, survival doesn't depend on comparison. And the problem is that our brains haven't caught up with that. So we still feel the need to measure up, even when it doesn't serve us and even when it's at our detriment. Because think about it, when you're scrolling through social media, how often do you feel genuinely inspired versus inadequate or jealous or questioning your life or instantly being like, ooh, is my life like that? Their life looks really good. This looks really exciting. Look at where they are. How can I do that? And comparison is so sneaky, my girlie. It disguises itself as motivation, right? When really it's there to drain your confidence. It's there to drain your self-worth. And social media enhances that. And the worst part is we compare our entire lives to curated, edited, polished moments that we see on social media through reels, through posts, through videos, through whatever. And I personally have fallen into this trap countless times. I remember looking at other podcast creators early on, feeling like I wasn't good enough. Their graphics were perfect, their aesthetic was perfect, their numbers, their views were so high, and they had and continue to have huge followings on their platforms for their podcasts. And it made me feel so inadequate and made me feel like a complete loser, and I didn't realize at the time that I was comparing my first chapter to someone else's middle or to someone else's almost complete, and that's what makes this trap so insidious. That's what makes it so sneaky. It's rarely a fair comparison. When we are doing this comparison, we're not comparing point A to point A. We're comparing point A to point J or point L or point N. And for us as women, it's so much worse because by nature, it's like societies want us comparing ourselves to each other. It's like as women, our mark of purpose, our mark of existence in this world is rooted in comparison, is rooted in, am I as good as all these other women? And, for one woman, it's about career success. For another woman, it's body image or relationships. But no matter what the focus is, it all stems from one thing, and that is the fear that we're not enough. So this brings me to social media. I talk so much about social media in so many episodes, but social media is part of our lives. Social media is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it connects us and it provides us with endless inspiration, right? On the other hand, it amplifies the comparison trap. like nothing else. Oh my God. If you want to feel inadequate, scroll through TikTok, scroll through Instagram. If you truly want to feel inadequate, just do that. I've come to learn through being on social media and through seeing like what people share online and then seeing their actual lives is what you see on social media is not real. I can't tell you how many times I'll be on social media, specifically Instagram, and I'll see like makeup content and people will be like in the comments of those makeup content being like, "Oh my God, your skin is so perfect. No pores, no this, no that." And it's like, well, yeah, of course. Of course you don't see all those things because it's filtered out, right? Or like, oh my God, how do you have like the perfect body? Well, there's filters for that, right? There's filters for that. It's like they have the perfect life, but you're not seeing how much debt they're in to showcase that perfect life, you know? So think about the last time you saw a photo of someone on like a luxurious, exciting vacation, or you saw them achieving a milestone that you yourself have been working toward. Did it spark like excitement for you or happiness for that person, or inspiration? Or did it trigger you? Did you start feeling doubtful? Did you start instantly being like, why not me? Right? But you have to know that social media thrives on curation. It thrives on fakeness. I like to view social media as a virtual reality, right? It's like the moment you are log on to any of these social media platforms, you're not in the real world anymore. It's like when you put on those virtual reality goggles, it's the exact same thing, except you're using your thumb. And the vacations, the perfectly lit dinners, the perfectly candid but not really candid moments, they're all part of a carefully constructed narrative. And that narrative doesn't include the realities of our lives. It doesn't include the ebbs and flows of life, right? Because again, it's a virtual reality. And the thing is, we know this. We know this. And even when we know this, we still fall for it. Isn't that crazy? We still fall for it. Our brains are wired to compare because these images hit us on an emotional level. We're triggered emotionally. Seeing someone else's success feels like a threat to our own, even when that's not true. And this is actually called the social comparison bias. And it's why we can't help but measure and compare ourselves to others. Early in my podcast journey, I follow several creators who seem to have it all figured out. And instead of feeling inspired by them, I would spiral into all these feelings of like self doubt. It wasn't jealousy, it was me feeling doubtful of myself and of my purpose in creating this podcast. I felt so behind, and it took me months to realize that their paths didn't invalidate mine. Their wins didn't take away from what I was building. They're meant to serve as inspiration for, hey, look, they did it, so I can do it too. I can do it too, because there's someone who's doing it. So if they can do it, I can do it too, right? And another layer to this is algorithms. Oh my Lord. The pressure that social media algorithms put on us is insane, especially if you're a girlie who has their own business or you are active on social media for reasons other than just being on there for personal reasons, because the platforms, they're designed to keep us scrolling by showing us the content we engage with the most, right? So if you're already comparing yourself to someone, the algorithm will ensure that you see more of their content. And then that creates just a vicious cycle, right? And the worst thing about this is how invisible struggles get erased, like the influencer you see with the dream life might also be battling anxiety or debt or burnout, but we rarely see that. We're comparing our real lives, our ups and downs, our ebbs and flows, our realities to someone else's highlight reel, to someone else's edited content, to someone else's chosen content to post. To combat this, we need to shift how we engage with social media. Instead of just like passively consuming content on social media, follow people and follow accounts, follow creators, follow businesses who inspire you in the best way possible. Who, the moment you see a story from them or the moment you see a TikTok post from them, you you feel good, you smile, And so another thing is setting boundaries with your scrolling time. I've talked a lot about social media, so I want to move on and touch more on the psychology behind the comparison trap, because understanding why you compare yourself is the first step to breaking free. And it was the first step for me. So, why do we compare ourselves in the first place? Why are you comparing yourself to all these people in the first place? Research points to something I mentioned earlier, which is the social comparison theory. And this theory essentially says that as human beings, we have an innate desire to evaluate ourselves. And usually we do this by looking at others. So there's actually two types of comparisons. There's upward comparison and there's downward comparison. Upward comparison happens when we measure ourselves against someone we perceive to be better. This can be really inspiring, but on the other hand, it can lead to feeling inadequate, right? And then downward comparison is looking at someone or comparing ourselves to someone that we perceive to be less than or worse off, right? This one is really interesting because it can provide you like this temporary boost in self-esteem. By the way, neither of these are healthy in the long term for you. And then the reason for that is because they're both focused on external validation rather than internal growth. So they're highly dependent on what other people are doing, on what you can't control, right? Because when we compare ourselves to others, we're outsourcing our sense of worth. We're leaving our worth and our self-respect in the hands of others. So instead of like asking, am I improving? Am I growing? We tend to ask ourselves, am I better than them? And it's a mindset that completely traps us in this cycle of never feeling good enough. And it really sucks because comparison shifts our focus away from gratitude, from self-acceptance, from our own individual journey. And instead of like celebrating our own milestones, however big or small they are, we're constantly chasing someone else's. And the thing that makes it a vicious cycle is that most of us start focusing or are focusing on what others are doing, and we do so at the expense of our own growth. We fail to see our own growth. We fail to see our own progress. We fail to see that we're actually making progress. And we fixate on external comparison and we fixate on them so much that we miss out on living our own authentic lives, on living our own paths. What I've learned is in order to break free from this cycle, I had to practice self-comparison. So asking myself when it comes to the progress of this podcast, of my podcast, what progress has been made right now compared to 6 months ago, compared to when I first started. Self-comparison for you would be reflecting on where you were a year ago, 5 years ago, 5 months ago. And I've learned that honestly, self-comparison centers your growth rather than someone else's, right? Because it doesn't make external validation your focal point. It makes your progress, your experiences, your wins the center point, the vocal point. That actually just made me think of society. My God, my girlie, the expectations societies have had and continue to put on us as women is so exhausting. No matter how much we try to prevent it or deal with it, it never goes away. And truly, societal expectations shape the way we compare ourselves. And often they do so without us even realizing it. Societal expectations, they play this huge role in fueling the comparison trap. From when we're little girls, we're taught to measure our success through external milestones, through good grades, through a prestigious job, through marriage, through kids, a house, etc. And these benchmarks are so deeply ingrained in us that we rarely question them, right? But the reality is no one's path looks the same, and it's not supposed to look the same. An example of this is like the by 30 checklist, right? Which I see so much of this on YouTube and Pinterest, where it's like, as women, by 30, we're supposed to have a stable career, be married, own a home, have kids, complete or higher education, be financially stable, have a large group of friends, look a certain way, act a certain way, have it all together, have it all figured out, with no room for mistakes, with no room for the realities of life. And for so many of us, these societal expectations create invisible deadlines that fuel comparison. If you're not meeting these milestones on time, it's so easy to feel like you're failing. Even if by your own standards, you're actually thriving. Isn't that crazy? And for me, this showed up in my career. I used to think I was so behind because I didn't land a dream job right out of college, because I truly did not know what my dream job was. And I knew I didn't want to do what everyone in my class was doing. And it took years for me to unlearn that success isn't linear. It took years for me to learn that I have to go by my values and by my timeline, by my path. And now I see that every path I've taken and every turn I've made has brought me closer to where I'm supposed to be. And for me, where I'm supposed to be, I've learned is doing good for us women. And for you, where you're supposed to be is going to be completely different from mine, right? And your best friend's timeline, your best friend's path is going to look different than yours. Your sibling's path is going to look different from yours. Your spouse's path is going to look different from yours, right? But you'll have points within your own individual paths where you meet. And the pressure to conform to societal timelines, for me, it was holding me back from truly embracing my own individual journey, my own unique journey, my own journey that made my life, that made me, right? And the thing about societal expectations is that they're also amplified through cultural and familial influences. Some of us feel the weight of cultural traditions or values passed down from previous generations. So maybe your family expects you to follow a specific path in your career, in your life. And when you don't, it's easy to feel like you're disappointing them, or like you're disappointing yourself, or like you're a failure because they tell you that you're a failure, because they tell you that you're disappointing them, or there's this like silent, but like there's this like unspoken disappointment from your culture, from your community, from your family, right? And if this is the case for you, please know that no one can define success for you but you. And simply ask yourself, what does success mean to me? Is it financial stability? Is it freedom to travel? Is it building meaningful relationships? Is it becoming a mother? Is it having a family of your own? What is success to you? And whatever that is for you, whatever success is for you, it's okay for it to change as you grow, as you experience life more. But you redefine success on your own terms, comparison loses its power. So we've explored like the depth and impact of the comparison trap, right? And just how bad comparing yourself can be, but how do you actually stop it? And that's what I want to touch on right now. I do want to just mention that these aren't quick fixes, but they're tools you can practice consistently to shift your mindset. So the first thing is self-awareness. Start paying attention to the triggers that create comparison for you. So is your trigger a specific person? Is it a social media platform? Is it, even a conversation? Once you identify the source of these triggers, you can begin to set boundaries. So, for example, if scrolling through Instagram leaves you feeling inadequate, try limiting your time on Instagram. Another tool is journaling. And with journaling, just write down your thoughts when you catch yourself comparing. So you can do this on your notes app. You can do this through voice notes even, or just physically writing in your journal or on a piece of paper. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Why do I feel this way? What triggered this feeling? Something I learned is that usually comparison reveals like our unmet needs or our insecurities. Maybe it's not about like wanting someone else's success or someone else's life or someone else's experiences, but rather it could be that you're feeling uncertain about your own path, right? And when you understand the root cause, you can just address it directly face on. Another tool is practicing gratitude. So many people talk about this, and honestly, at this point, it feels so cliche, but gratitude is actually scientifically proven to shift your focus and shift your mindset from what you lack to what you have. So try writing down three things you're grateful for each day, no matter how big or small they are. And notice how writing those things down or speaking those things out into the real world, notice how it changes your perspective. Another tool is like creating clear, personalized intentions. Because when you're focused on your own intentions, your own goals, you're less likely to be distracted by others. And part of the comparison trap is being distracted and being someone who is easily distracted. If you want more on this specific aspect, I do have an episode out about actually creating goals and intentions that are specific to you, that are specific to your journey, and that will allow you to have a meaningful, peace-filled, exciting, incredible life for the year ahead. The next one is celebrating other people's successes. Celebrate people. Practice genuinely cheering for the people around you. Practice genuinely being excited and happy for those people, for their accomplishments, because you don't know what it took for them to get there. And even if you do know what it took for them to get there, celebrate them. You know, the energy you give out to the world, the energy you give out to others is what you're going to get back. And I'm a very, very avid believer in that there's enough success, there's enough love, there's enough joy to go around 10 times over. And the last tool I have for you is mindfulness. So whenever you find yourself, starting that comparison, just come back to yourself. Bring yourself back to the present moment. Do some deep breathing exercises. Do a little bit of meditation, or just simply take a walk and focus on the walk itself. Being mindful reminds you that you're more than your achievement. You're more than the comparison. You're more than this trap. You're more than how you measure up to someone else or to other people. The comparison we do and the comparison we experience comes from chasing someone else's idea of success. But the truth is, success is personal. It is very, very personal. And it only feels meaningful when it aligns with your values and your desires and your own individual intentions. So, what does success mean to you? Not what does it mean to your best friend, not what does it mean to your coworker or the influencer you admire or your parents or your spouse or whoever, but what does it mean to you? What does success mean to you? And, if that is very overwhelming for you, then you can start by asking yourself, what are your values? Before success, what are your values? What do you value in this life? Do you value connection? Do you value creativity, stability, freedom? And if it's freedom, what kind of freedom? Is it freedom to travel? Freedom, financial freedom? That I've learned that when your definition of success is rooted in what you genuinely care about, it becomes so much easier to stay focused on your own path. And I think sometimes comparison pushes us towards things that look good on paper, but don't bring us joy. If you are someone who finds yourself constantly comparing, the fact that you acknowledge it is the first step to letting go of comparison and to letting go of negative comparison, right? Just remember to be patient with yourself. Have patience with yourself. You'll have days when the comparison sneaks back in, and that's okay, right? It's a natural part of being a human being. When those moments happen, just remind yourself it's progress, not perfection that matters, right? What matters is the fact that you can pinpoint when the comparison is happening, when it's starting to creep up, and also remembering that instead of focusing on what others are doing, just take time to reflect on the ways you yourself have grown and on the obstacles you've overcome. Write it down, talk about it, or share it with someone you trust. Your story is your story, your journey is your journey, and embrace it. embrace it. Comparison pulls you into this cycle of like thinking about someday I'll be as successful as her. Someday I'll have what he has. Someday I'll have this life too. Someday I'll be able to go to this place too. Someday blah 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 blah. But when you ground yourself in the present, when you allow yourself to be present in your specific life, your specific journey, my girlie, I promise you, you'll notice there's so much to actually appreciate in this very moment that you'll start to be like, why am I even comparing myself? You know, why am I doing all these comparisons when I actually have it good? I may not have it good consistently, but I have it good. Just give yourself permission to grow at your own pace. If you're trying to keep up with the Joneses, if you're trying to just do what everyone else is doing, you are going to live a life that is so miserable. And then one day you're going to look back at your life and you're going to be like, I hate my life. And you won't be able to like go back in time and change it. Right. And I don't want that for you. I don't want that for you, girlie. You shouldn't hate your life. You deserve to have a life that you love, a life that, like, every day you wake up and you're like, yeah, I love this. Maybe not every part of your life, but overall. And if you're constantly comparing, you're not going to love your life because you're going to always find something that is wrong with your life that does not measure up to other people's. Just think about that. All right, my girlie. So tonight we've explored how comparison can keep you stuck and how embracing your own individual, unique journey can set you free from this comparison. And that means define success on your terms. Know that your path is your own individual path, and take a moment to reflect on how comparison might be holding you back and how you can start focusing on your own growth and your own progress. Of course, to help with this, I've created a free Redefine Your Success worksheet just for you. It's a free resource that will guide you through the process of identifying your personal values and setting goals and intentions that are true to you and your own individual journey. You can find this free resource in the show notes or the YouTube description box. Before we wrap up, let's talk about next week's episode. Next week, in our season finale episode, we're going to dive into how embracing change can unlock your potential during life's biggest transitions. If you've been facing any shifts, uncertainties, or changes in your life, this is the episode for you. To close out our time this evening, remember your journey is your own and comparison absolutely has no place in it. Don't forget to sign up for our email newsletter for exclusive content, free resources, and the best holiday goodies. And that's it for tonight's episode, my girlie. Thank you for joining me this evening. I'm so glad to have you on this journey. If you've enjoyed this episode, go ahead and tap that follow or subscribe button and leave a review. It lets me and the algorithms know you're really here to grow, learn, and say. You can also find me and Talks with SAE on Instagram at Talks with SAE. And be sure to share this episode and the podcast with your girlies so they can say as well. Again, thank you, my girlie, for joining me, and more importantly, thank you for existing. Until next time, self-love bells.